Okay, welcome to the second tutorial on the Landscape Generator 2. Okay, so we're going to get our landscape generator here. And in the video before, I noticed that you cannot see the drop-down. That's fine. Just make sure you know that you have to go to Untitled Tools, and then it'll say Landscape Generator and New Landscape Generator. Click that. There's your landscape generator. We went through the general settings, terrain settings, and the detail settings in the last video, and how to add a landscape generator object to your scene. In this video we will be going over the tree settings, the water settings, the detail object settings, and the buttons. So let's start with the tree settings. The tree settings are similar to the detail settings. The number of trees, or the num of trees, is exactly how many trees will be generated on the terrain. When you click generate, the is procedural tree num, or is procedural tree number, if you check that, when it generates, it will set this to a procedurally generated number. Note that this makes trees pretty dense on your terrain most of the time. The wind power is the strength of the wind that will be generated on a new wind zone object. Like so here, we go to 3D object wind zone. It will create one of these and call it landscape wind zone. Okay, and it will set these, the main and the turbulence, to be whatever you set your wind power to be. Okay, let's go through the trees now. If I add a tree object, just like I added a detail object here, you'll see if you open the element 0, or any element for that matter, you will get a interface that looks similar to the grass here. The tree object is the object that will be generated on the terrain. The minimum and maximum position is the minimum and maximum position of where this tree object will be generated in world space, and you can show that position if you select show bounds and turn this color to something more visible, and make sure you have this alpha up for it to work. And of course you're going to want to set your maximum to something more reasonable. Oh. It's a little strange. It's not working. I wonder if I click generate, if it will. Okay. So as you can see, you have to click generate for it to update the tree settings here. That seems to be a glitch. This here, I just didn't set any of the terrain textures, that's why I'm getting errors. And as you can see, if you don't set any terrain textures, you're gonna get this here, basically just a white terrain. Okay, so the bounding box is shown in red here, and the green one, yeah, now it works, is for the first one here. As you can see, the trees only generate inside the bounding box, they don't go outside of it, and it goes by where the center of the tree is, and that happens to be at the bottom, and it usually will be. Okay. As you can see, if I set this to 25500, if I set it to the same color, basically, it will change it back, because it doesn't let you have the same color for bounding boxes, just to make it easier to know where each one is. So each one has a unique color. So if I just turn off these bounding boxes, you can show each one individually. The maximum slope is the maximum slope of where the tree can generate. As you can see, no trees generated on any of the steep parts, because this maximum slope was set to 10, which is the minimum. If I set this higher, like 50, and then I click generate again, as you can see, it generates trees on more of the terrain. And right here, there is a slope of either 50 or greater. Okay. I think we get the idea of that now. So let's move on to the water settings. The water settings are incredibly simple. The water objects are just the water objects that will be generated that's the light version. Okay. And the water height is the height of the water. So if I click generate, it'll generate water at a height of 10 in world space. So this is 10 units off the ground. And I'm just using the standard assets Pro Daytime Water for this. As you can see, there's some little puddles here, lakes. And if you increase this, it will increase the water level too. So let's see if I can get this higher. Whatever that will generate it. Yeah, see, that's higher now. And as you can see, no trees will generate underwater. That is a thing to note about trees. They do not generate underwater. Detail objects, on the other hand, can generate underwater, although you can tell them not to. Okay. So, and if there's more water objects here, it will just select one randomly. So if I select water for advanced and a pro nighttime water, it'll just select a random one to generate. There, it selected the water for advanced. It didn't. cover the entire terrain because it doesn't scale the water. The water is the least advanced feature of this generator. It only generates it and that's it. Just adds it to the terrain at a selected height. Okay, so that's really simple. Let's keep it there at a height of like 50. Okay, let's move on to our detail objects. If you open up the detail objects here and you add a detail object, you'll get a very similar interface to the one used for trees. As you can see, again, there's a detail object, which is like the tree object. So let's add a bush here, let's say. And there's a minimum and maximum position. If you click show bounds and you set the bounds colors or something, it will set it there. And once you've run the generator once, it will work with the show bounds. Okay, you have to generate it at least once though. If the minimum and if the maximum position is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, it will set it to the size of the terrain, which is right here, terrain size. Or if you have a terrain here, it will set it to the size of that terrain if you're not generating the terrain procedurally. Okay, so as you can see, once I click show bounds, if it is black, if the bounds are black, it will just set it to something that is not black when you edit it a bit. It should anyway. I believe it actually only sets it once, so if you set it back to black, it will stay black. Okay. You also have to keep the alpha up if you don't want it transparent. Okay, so let's go to the enable underwater setting. This, like I said before, you can enable detail objects underwater. Detail objects, by the way, are basically just any other object that you want on the terrain that doesn't fit into trees, water, or grass. So any other object goes here, basically. So if you want to generate the detail object underwater, you can check that. Also, trees will not be generated on the sand layer. These will be. The number of details is how many of this detail object will be generated on the terrain. So you can set these individually. The tree settings, this is overall how many trees there are. So you can't set how many trees you want here. Okay, but it does generate faster. The is procedural detail number is basically the same thing as the is procedural tree number. It just sets the number of details for each detail object instead of setting the number of trees for all the trees. Okay, that covers all of the object settings. Let's see if we can generate some detail objects here. Here's our trees, and here's our bushes. So you can see there are 1,000 bushes here. And we did not enable the details underwater, so there are no detail objects underwater. Now, If I click that and I generate it again, you can see there's detail objects underwater. Okay. And this would probably only be used for like rocks if you want to generate them there. So let's set this to a procedural detail number, and I'm going to generate, and there you go. It sets it to a number that makes a little bit more sense for the number of detail objects anyway. There's our terrain. Now you might have noticed there is not an option for slope here like there was for trees. That is an advantage of the trees. So if you want an object to be generated on a area with a certain slope, you should use trees. Okay. So I've been using all these buttons here, the generate, destroy, and finish. This is just from the Pro Water. Let's get rid of that. That's not part of the generator at all. The generate button, these buttons are pretty self-explanatory except for the finish. The generate button will generate the terrain, as you can see here, with a nice little progress bar, and it will create a procedural terrain, a temporary wind zone, and the clone the water object into your scene. And any other objects go there. The destroy button gets rid of it, and if you finish, it compiles everything into a landscape here, and that's just everything. So if you wanted to move it, per se, you could move it. The destroy button will now not work if you try to destroy the landscape, is something to know. If you want to get rid of the landscape now, you can just click on it and click delete. It doesn't lag anymore. The terrain itself is a lot more optimized. So let's go over the auto generate. If you click create landscape, it will create it and compile it into a single landscape, and if I click create landscape again, it'll make another one. Pretty simple. If I click generate separately, I can generate the terrain, and notice there's not a progress bar for these, which is the downside. And then you can click destroy. Now you can't generate trees if there isn't a terrain, so we're going to have to generate a terrain. You can generate water though. Generate terrain. Let's generate some trees now. There's the trees inside our bounding box with a minimum maximum slope. And you might have noticed, even though I don't have the water in here, since I've set the water height, when I generate the water, the trees are not underwater, which is nice. So I can click generate detail objects now. Oh, Unity might have just frozen. Yep. Oh, you know what this is? It gets a little glitchy when you start generating things in separate order here. If I generate trees, you have to generate the trees before you can generate detail objects based on how the detail objects are generated. They're treated as trees, and so they have to be added after the trees themselves, and the trees are only added when generate trees is clicked or run. That may be changed in the future, so you can generate detail objects by themselves, but for now you have to generate trees and generate their water, and you notice the detail objects are not underwater because we didn't set them to be. And you can change all these if you want. What you're not going to want to change is the LandGenOb script, landscape generator object. This is a placeholder object that tells the landscape generator what type of object this is and holds some data for it, so it can compile it correctly, remove unnecessary stuff, and rename some objects. So you'll notice, for example, if I click finish now, remember how the wind zone was called temp wind zone? Now it's called wind zone. And it gets rid of the placeholder scripts too. Okay, so that's it for the second tutorial on the Landscape Generator 2. I will see you in the next tutorial, and that will be on the Untitled Tools height map wizard here. You might not be able to see it. Well, I'll figure it out in the next tutorial. Okay, see you in the next tutorial.